Journey mapping. It's a common tool for most CX practitioners and very useful when trying to discover your customers' experiences, but beware of the detours.
There is a trap that you can get caught in producing a process map. And a process map is important, and that documentation is important to companies. But a journey map is more about discovering what's important to customers.
Avoiding the traps and shortcuts that can undermine how you discover your customer's journey on this episode of the CX Leader Podcast.
The CX Leader Podcast with Steve Walker is produced by Walker, a business consulting firm that helps our clients unlock the potential of their customer experiences by placing the customer at the heart of all their business decisions. You can find out more at walkerinfo.com.
Hello again, everybody. This is Steve Walker, Chairman and CEO of Walker Information and also host of the CX Leader Podcast. We thank you for listening, getting a lot of good feedback, and this is the place where CX leaders come to explore the topics and themes that help you leverage all the benefits of your customer experience and help your customers and prospects want to do more business with you. If you're a CX professional, then you're no stranger to journey mapping. That process in which you and your colleagues engage in a series of activities in order to discover what your customer experiences when doing business with you. We at Walker have extensive experience in journey mapping, so we're going to dedicate the next 3 episodes on how to avoid some of the common traps or detours, often experienced when recreating your customer's journey and applying it to your business strategy. And to start us off on this first podcast in the series, or shall we say this journey, we have 2 certified customer experience professionals here in the studio today. My longtime colleague and frequent guest, Melissa Meier, Vice President in our Consulting Services Group. Welcome back to the podcast, Melissa.
Thank you.
And joining us for the first time is Sheila March, the Customer Experience Manager for Ascension Ministry Service Center here in Indianapolis. Welcome to the CX Leader Podcast, Sheila.
Hi, thank you.
So glad to have you. Just for background, tell our listeners a little bit about you and also about Ascension Health.
Well, I'm Sheila March. I'm the Customer Experience Manager for Ascension Health's Ministry Service Center here in Indianapolis. So I am leading the customer experience transformation for the service center. We basically manage all of the back office stuff that typically happens in a hospital. So human resources, supply chain, as well as accounting functions all run through our service center. So our customers are really Ascension associates across the country. So we support 160,000 associates across the country in those service areas. But not only just our associates, but also our suppliers, vendors, and our process partners as well. So when I'm talking customers, it definitely encompasses a wide variety of individuals.
And the footprint goes coast to coast, or is it primarily in the Midwest?
Primarily east of the Mississippi.
Okay. And the name Ministry Services, give a little insight on that.
It's a Ministry Service Center. So Ascension calls their hospitals health ministries.
Right.
So if you hear me today and I say health ministry, what I mean is hospital. So the Ministry Service Center, we serve those that serve in our hospitals.
So we're going to talk a little bit about journey mapping and how that applies in this situation. And we're going to kind of do it by talking about the detours that might get you off the track of your journey map. And so I thought I might just ask Melissa to sort of give us an overview of what a process map is versus what we would consider to be a true journey map. So.
Yeah, there is a big difference between a process map and a journey map. And actually, here at Walker, we've done a lot of journey mapping, and we've reviewed a lot of journey maps that our clients have done. And there is a trap that you can get caught in producing a process map. So the difference between the two, a process map is primarily about documentation. And for companies who are heavily process focused, as most companies are, it's very easy to sit down and document what the internal functions deliver to customers. And a process map is important, and that documentation is important to companies. But a journey map is more about discovering what's important to customers. And actually, one of the key findings of a journey map is understanding where the customer journey differs from the process that a company has in place. So that's one fundamental difference. The other is that obviously a process map by definition is naturally more internally focused to the company, whereas a journey map is truly customer focused. And with that comes things like what are the emotions that customers are experiencing. A process map is usually fairly devoid of emotion and is very blueprint oriented. So I think, at the end of the day, if you summarize a difference between a process map and a journey map, a process map will provide a lot of value to a company where they can see what their processes look like. A journey map, if done well, is truly bringing to life what customers want and what's important to customers.
Sheila, you're a practitioner who has recently gone through this process. What's your perspective on process versus journey mapping? And have you found it difficult to get teams to go through this process?
Yeah, sure. So I definitely agree with Melissa. From what we found, as I said earlier, the way that we started was pretty process focused because it had to be. But what a process map does, it gives us an idea of the beginning of the interaction with us to the very end. And what I like about the journey map is, what it takes into account what happened before their first interaction with us and what's going to happen after. And it tells more of a story than a process map. So I think not only does it connect, what the customer wants, but it can connect more to the internal employees too, where they can really understand, so when I'm doing this part of the process and I'm telling them this is what they hear, this is how they feel. So I really think it helps to basically tell the complete story of what's going on. And, when I was brand new in this position, we wanted to jump right in and start journey mapping, and we did. We did some smaller ones, but one of the things that I do remember that we found that was really different with one of the smaller processes that we did this around was we had some simple processes that were just maybe 4 or 5 steps. If you looked at the map, it was like, boom, here we go, yes, no, yes, okay, then here. But when we looked at it from the customer's perspective, we identified what we called at the time were like waiting stages, right? So this is when we were working and we were doing all of these wonderful things, but nobody was communicating back to the customer on the end. So we wondered why we were getting multiple calls and why people were so frustrated. Well, they didn't know what was happening, and they didn't know we were doing all that work. So, it seems pretty common sense, but we decided to add in some communication points there in those waiting stages.
How did you make sure that you got the customer point of view into it and not simply the internal perspective, so you avoid that trap of getting a process map?
Right. Well, back then, we had created some personas. So when we did it on a smaller scale, before we started working with a facilitator, we really focused on who the persona was, and we talked through that. We listened to some recorded calls so we could kind of get in the mindset of the customers and, what they may be thinking.
Wow, that's great. Now, did you have a facilitator, outside facilitator?
So in the beginning, no, but recently we have been working with Walker. You guys have done some of our larger projects that we're doing.
And did you have a good facilitator?
She was all right.
I think it was Melissa.
It was Melissa. She was amazing. Yes. Yeah. So the one we did with Walker was great. It was a large project because it involved a couple different entities of Ascension, and we brought them together, and it was a great experience.
So I'm just teasing you because I know you are a good facilitator, but what is the role of the facilitator, and how do you make sure that you get that outside perspective?
I think having a good facilitator is so important to coming out with a really good representation of the customer journey. The facilitator's role is truly to be neutral and to have the customer perspective, also hear the company perspective, and being able to facilitate the process so that you come out with that complete story that Sheila described. And a facilitator doesn't have to be from outside the company. It can be someone, within a company who has really good facilitation skills. But I think that idea of neutrality or being unbiased is important. If you don't have a dog in the fight, you're more likely to make sure that the conversation is staying focused on the customer. A couple of other things that, just in my experience after having facilitated a lot of different journey map sessions, as well as just other roundtable sessions, is that to have a good facilitated session, you need to spend most of your time listening and then using what you've heard to ask the right questions. That's really critical to pulling out from the group what ultimately will be part of the journey map story. A couple of other things that are just logistics associated with facilitating sessions would be connecting to your group, making sure that you have a good vibe between yourself and who's in the room. If they're just looking at you and giving you one-word answers, you're going to have to try something a little bit different because you really want to pull out the conversation from the group. The final thing is really just having a good sense of timing, having some structure to the session, but also being flexible to go deep into points that require some discovery, but making sure that the participants don't get stuck in the weeds. And that's probably the easiest thing that can happen when you get a group of employees together talking about customer experience, is you can get in a rat hole of talking about the same thing over and over. So a good facilitator will get that documented, but then keep the audience focused on the prize.
Yes, and I definitely appreciated that because we are definitely very good at going down rat holes where I'm from. So Melissa always did a great job of pulling us out and making sure we were staying focused on what we needed to be. So it was good.
Good.
Well, we've covered what's important and the skills required to keep your focus on the customer and not be internally focused on just what the company processes are. Why is this even important? I mean, don't companies already know what's important to their customers, Sheila?
Well, they should, but that's that's kind of a loaded question, right, Steve? So I think a lot of companies think they know what's best for their customers and take that approach. I think a lot of times leaders that are making those final decisions, while they have the best intentions ever, sometimes they're not down there with the front line or down there with the customers that are having the interactions with the organization. So it's easy, I think, from above or from that decision-making area to say, this sounds good, this makes sense. And in some cases it does, but maybe once it's implemented and the process happens, it doesn't always end up being what the customer needs.
Just to tag on to that, Sheila, I, in working with a client recently, as we were preparing for a journey map project, they felt like they had these really great hypotheses of knowing exactly how customers want to engage with a company. And someone in the room said, but wait a second, we've never actually asked customers. How would we know? We've got a good idea, we hear anecdotal information, but we've never actually talked to customers. So I think companies should know, but when you're so internally focused, if you don't have that outside perspective who's asking the right questions or challenging long-held opinions or ideas, you end up too internally focused.
We've covered off on some of the key parts of the importance of bringing in the customer viewpoint to your journey map so that it doesn't turn into a process map. And also the importance of facilitation. Melissa, you've done a lot of these and across a lot of industries. What are the kind of the common elements that we see across all companies, and then where are the differences that you see?
So I think one of the things that would be very consistent with a journey map process across industry is that every time that I've been involved in a journey map process, there is a finding or a twist to the customer journey that was unexpected. And as I think about our theme here today, which is what are the detours to avoid, one of which being don't do a process map, do a journey map. A process map is a really great way to miss something. If you're doing a well-rounded customer journey map, you will likely uncover some things that you didn't anticipate. And that's the benefit and that's the value of going through the process. So, I've done it a number of times with a number of different companies, different parts of the organization, and there's always something that gets uncovered that they weren't expecting.
Sheila, you have quite a bit of experience with journey mapping. What's your advice to our listeners? What's really critical to getting to a good output from your customer journey activity?
So I think the facilitation is so important. Whether you can go outside of your organization and have a facilitator, that's great. That's because that person brings in another viewpoint and they can keep you on track, and it really helps to keep that customer focus. But if you can't, and you're internal and maybe you're the customer experience manager that's facilitating these, my advice would be don't overthink it. Make sure that you're focusing on, what the customer's doing and how they're feeling during each one of the stages. And then make sure that, you have a good cross-functional team from your organization. I mean, that's what I found has been the most important in any journey map that we've done, whether it's been on a large scale or smaller, is having those different perspectives and including the front line and everything, because they're the ones that are interacting with the customers the most. And then most importantly, since this is, how to make sure you don't, mess this up, right? So when you have things that need to be improved or action items that need to happen, make sure you're partnering with the operations teams and the people in the leadership that can drive those, and you have the right influencers in the journey mapping process so they know the importance of, this particular outcome of this map and can go and affect change within the organization.
Yeah, I'm sure that in addition to the breakthroughs that Melissa was talking about, there is just a real value to the quality of having these cross-functional groups dialogue on this. And I've seen it, how often they just realize that what they were doing doesn't impact other parts of the company. Hey, Melissa, what's your parting words of advice? We like to have take-home value on this podcast. So if I'm a CX professional, maybe worried about my journey map, what would I do?
So my final words of advice would be, I think, listening to the tips that Sheila provided, which are right on point and very accurate. The other thing that I would add to this conversation today would be, don't underestimate how hard it can be to stay focused on the customer. I think it's all very easy for us to stay focused within the company. It's easy to have that mindset. It can be difficult to truly think outside and think about what is the customer experience. We've shared some tactics here today on how to do that, but I think as you're planning your journey map, if you really want to avoid the process map route and you want to do a complete customer journey story, really make sure you're taking the steps to bring the customer voice into the process.
Sheila, final thoughts, the last word?
Like Melissa said, talk to your customers. It's great to have this and look at it from the customer perspective, but just make sure that you're hitting the nail on the head and you've done all this work and it actually is what your customers want. So I guess my final words of advice are talk to your customers.
Absolutely. Your customers can tell you a lot of things about your business. Sheila March is a certified customer experience professional. She is the customer experience manager for Ascension Ministry Service Center here in Indianapolis. Sheila, thank you for your business. Thank you for taking some time out today, and thank you for sharing your insights with our listeners.
Thank you.
If they'd like to get in touch with you, any contact information you'd be willing to share in case a podcast listener would like to follow up with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I also am on Twitter, Sheila March 1.
March as in the
month. Yeah.
Excellent. And if you want to talk to Melissa, how would we get a hold of you?
I am also on Twitter. I could be found at Mel Meier. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I could be reached at mmeyer@walkerinfo.com.
And if you want to talk about anything else we discussed today or any of the other podcasts that we have out there, or how Walker might be able to help you with your customer experience, you can contact me at steve.walker@walkerinformation.com or call me here in the U.S. at 1-317-843-8890. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, Melissa, or Sheila, or any other fine people here at Walker, and we'll be happy to talk to you more. We've got quite a bit of resources available on the topic of journey mapping, and they're posted to our website, including a recording of our recent webcast, When Journey Maps Don't Go the Distance, 3 Detours to Avoid. We also have a free downloadable ebook by the same title, and you can find all those resources as well as links to subscribe to this podcast at walkerinfo.com/podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode of the CX Leader Podcast, which is a production of Walker. We're a business consulting firm that can help you make customer experience your biggest advantage and make sure that your customers are at the heart of every business decision. Find out more at walkerinfo.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.